I'm Scott Lucas. This is today's EA Worldview on Syria. The Assad regime's election extravaganza. This week, the Assad regime has ramped up its preparations for elections in June. We have had declarations from Parliament that it is setting down the election laws for a performance of democracy that includes all Syrians. Syria's ambassador to the UN took a slightly different line, warning other countries not to interfere with this showcase in which President Assad would be facing election and, of course, would be quite likely to win. In addition to this, we have had days after days on state media of Syrians supposedly turning out in thousands in Homs, in Hama, in Damascus, in the south, near the Lebanese border, all supporting the regime and the army and their glorious fight against terrorism and for, you guessed it, democracy. Now, forget for a moment that these pictures haven't actually been reported by any foreign correspondents, that we don't actually know if they're real, that we don't actually know if those tight shots of a few dozen Syrians actually opens up onto many thousands behind them. Leave all that to the side. What we have here is a performance, and it's a performance with a very sharp political motive. You see, the fundamental demand, which goes back not just months but years, is that President Assad shouldn't even be standing for re-election. He should step aside for a transitional government. That was what was issued out of the Geneva I conference in the middle of 2012. It was what the opposition took into the Geneva II conference in January and February. But of course, when they got to Geneva, the Assad delegation, much to the frustration of the UN mediators, said it again and again, we won't even put this on the agenda. We are only here to fight terrorism because that, of course, will protect our, you guessed it, democracy. Now, the bills that have been passed by Parliament this week have, we have been told by state media, allowed other parties, many parties, to put forth representatives not only in the presidential race, but for Parliament and for local councils. And perhaps in theory it's true. Perhaps in practice you'll actually see their names on the ballots. But let's get real here. In a situation where more than a quarter of Syrians aren't even in their homes anymore, becoming refugees or displaced persons, in a situation where much of the country is controlled by insurgents and not by the regime, and most importantly, in a situation in which the regime is devoted first and foremost to the survival of President Assad, do you think this is going to be a real election? Well, whatever the case, you can enjoy the show for the next few months, because the fact is that the Assad regime now thinks it has an advantage in saying that it is legitimate. It can simply go to international conferences and say that the opposition is no more than puppets for foreign powers and serving terrorists. And as long as enough people believe that, or at least not willing to oppose it, then the election show and President Assad can go on and on and on. I'm Scott Lucas, and this has been today's EA Worldview on Syria.